Welcome to Raid My Lab, a new web series for makers, coders, and tinkerers. Each week we'll cover a topic such as Arduinos, Raspberry Pis, sensors, and other odds and ends that I have laying around my shop. So what makes this series different? I'm not the one choosing the topics. I've created an ESP8266 button that when pressed will shoot a message to a Raspberry Pi over MQTT. That Raspberry Pi will take the message and send it on to an Apache PHP server where it's going to query a MySQL database. That query will choose a random topic from the database and send it back to the Raspberry Pi where it will be displayed on the big screen in the lab, and we're going to talk about whatever the computer says we have to talk about. I'm going to grab that box of whatever and I'm going to pull it off the shelf and we're going to find out what's inside, and we're going to dig through the sensors and we're going to learn about what kinds of things I've bought over the years and why in the world I bought them. Could I have just pulled a topic out of a hat? Sure. But we're makers. We build stuff whether it has a purpose or not. Are you excited? Are you ready to get started? Not so fast. The first episode doesn't come out until the end of July. But in the meantime, you can still watch how I built all of the tech, and you can see the C and the PHP and the JavaScript and the MySQL that makes the entire thing work. And oh yeah, it involves lasers too. So let's start the show. All right, we have a ton of ground to cover as we're going to build a lot of tech. We're going to use a lot of different software, a lot of different hardware to make this whole thing happen. And it all starts with the Arduino sketch. And we're not actually using an Arduino. We are using something known as an ESP8266. The one that we're using is actually called the WeMOS D1 Mini. As you can see, it's less than $2.50 shipped to the US, and if you order them in bulk you might get them a little cheaper, a little faster also, but they're great boards compared to an Arduino that runs at 16 megahertz, something like that. These run at 80 megahertz. They have built-in Wi-Fi. They don't have as many pins. This one doesn't have as many pins as a lot of the other boards, but it just has everything we need for this thing in order to make a button and send a message. Like, that's all we're doing. There's plenty of pins. We need one. So our code is really simple, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but this is your typical MQTT sketch. And so we'll be showing you a little bit more about MQTT later, but basically you are connecting to the Wi-Fi and using the pub sub client, which is how we send MQTT messages. Now, there are a lot of ways to connect one of these things to Wi-Fi, and there are things that will make a hotspot so you can change your Wi-Fi password later and all that kind of stuff. And I love those things. I'm just keeping this sketch as simple as possible. I don't even really think I need to give this one a MAC address, but I'm going to give it an IP address, tell it where the DNS is. This is the IP address of my router, my subnet mask, and the IP address that the server is. Now the server will be the same for, like, I have one server and it's static IP in the house, so it's always going to be 225. You put in your Wi-Fi password and your SSID. Now, again, there are ways that you could do that without having to hard code that in there, but we're not going to do that because this is really simple. In fact, you don't even need this C string thing up here. That's for if you're receiving. So I have a button and it is set to 0. Now, one of the things that's weird about WeMOS, and you'll have to look up the chart, is that basically when you look on there, you'll see something like the pin will be labeled D0. And especially on these WeMOS D1 minis, you have to actually look up the corresponding. So this is actually, I believe it's pin 3 is actually labeled as 0. So it's, you'll have to look up the conversion chart, but basically we're using pin 3, 3 on the board itself. So then we're going to turn on the Wi-Fi client and the MQTT client. And then basically what we have here is an attempt to reconnect. Like, let's say that we lose connection to the server. Every 20 seconds, it's going to make another attempt to reconnect to the server if it doesn't have a connection. And when it does, it's going to send a message on the topic of hello that says RML button. So I know that, like, the Raid My Lab button just popped up on the network when I see a message on my dashboard that says RML button. So very typical stuff here in the setup. We are taking the one button that we have and we're using the internal pull-up resistor. So what that basically means is that the board will see the pin as high, and then when I push the button, the way I like to think about it is it thinks it is high, and then when I push the button low, like I physically push the button down low, then that's how it knows that it's triggered. And so we're going to connect to the server, and then we're just going to print a few things where it tells us what our IP address is and stuff in case I forget that later. And then, so real simple. All that happens is it makes sure the Wi-Fi is turned on, and then if it detects that the button is pressed low, then it sends out a message on the topic of raid my lab, and it says raid time, and that's it. So it's constantly sitting there looking for a button press. It's going to delay 5 seconds because I'm going to push this button once a week, so it's perfectly fine to debounce and make sure that that it doesn't get triggered multiple times. So that's it. That's the sketch. We're going to take it. You can upload it. And WeMoss sketches take a little bit longer to upload. There's a little bit more stuff that has to go on here. But it'll upload, and then we'll be ready to build our box. Okay, so this project doesn't require a lot of soldering. We have our standard WeMoss D1 Mini. And I've grabbed a set of these jumper wires. I love to keep a bunch of them on hand. They're cheap. You can come in here, you can get them in different sizes and all that. So I keep them stored. I keep them stored by style. So you can see there's female, female, male, 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 female. Being Pride Month and all, we got all the options in there. So what we need to do is have a button, and so if you grab my thing of little buttons here, now every fiber of my being wants to use something like a blue button, but being that there's a little bit of a military theme here and a little bit of a rating theme, I feel like you have to go with a red button. Like there's just really no choice. You have to use red. So I'm going to use male headers because I've got a female header going on here, and so we are going to just kind of stick these in here. And I'm going to do them one at a time because these things like to break and they like to be a little bit of a pain in the butt. So what we're going to do, we're going to grab some solder from our homemade solder rack. I really want to extend my soldering iron cable. I've ordered a replacement, and I think that's going to happen in the video. So I'm going to do a junky job soldering these because it's not really going anywhere. It's just going to sit here on my desk, and I think you guys have better things to do than to watch me solder all day. So we're just gonna make it stick. Let's twist this a little bit first. It's kind of got a little glob on the end. So we're gonna fold that through. We're gonna solder that one. Just fill it up, make it stick, get it hot enough to stick, call it a day. This is not, let's make sure that actually stuck there. This is not high-tech work. We're just doing a button. So what's going to happen is this thing is going to go between pins D3 and ground, and it will be what triggers the Raid My Lab. We're going to stop right there, and next week we'll pick back up building the box with the laser cutter. I'm just starting this channel out with this new format, and it would mean a lot to me if you would like and subscribe and maybe even share the channel as I try to build it up and produce some content that you guys will find interesting. See you next week.